Very good.
Sorry, I got the cord because the battery is running out, so I went to connect it to the mains. Right. So was the sound okay and everything?
Yeah, everything's great.
Okay, so I'll just continue. The next one is also by a woman called Jerry Gale. Her real name is Yana Shemaeva from near Kiev. She's well known, although she's quite young, as a kind of ethno-electronics performer. This is a fairly popular trend in contemporary Ukrainian pop music in general. And if you've been following maybe I don't know, the latest several European song contests. This is what Ukraine usually does: a combination of folk tunes in an electronic package that's danceable sometimes, and you know, quite rousing. It's what trends at the moment. This song combines one of the very well-known old folk songs from probably late 17th century, which lists the names and behavior of various national Ukrainian heroes, Getmans, as it were, so military commanders of old Ukraine, Doroshenko, Sagaidachny, and others. And it replaces them with today's Ukrainian heroes, such as President Zelensky, one of the Ukrainian government spokesmen, Arestovich, although ethnically he's Belarusian, but he just works and lives in Ukraine and became like a face of the Ukrainian government, informing people on the latest events on the front line in the country in general. And
just quickly on the Belarus thing, I mean, I know that Belarus has been occupied, or rather their president has made agreements with Putin and made this alliance with Russia and been rather assimilated into Russia. But I'm sure that it's more complicated on the ground in Belarus, and maybe people don't necessarily feel that the country is speaking for them in that alliance. There must be lots of people from Belarus who feel alliance also with people in Ukraine.
Absolutely. And we don't know how much legitimacy this particular president actually has, because the general impression is that he lost his elections, the last elections that he had in 2020. So I suppose he just held on to his post by brutal force. Many Belarusians left the country, but even recently I read that a Belarusian border guard escaped to join Ukraine from the border between Belarus and Ukraine, to try and sort of fight for Ukraine on the Ukrainian side. So that's definitely, if true, it's definitely an indicator that Belarusians are not with. Many Belarusians are not with their president on this one.
Yes, I have a couple of friends from Belarus who I've known on Twitter, and they were saying how through Twitter friends, and yeah, I've heard lots of expressions about how they're living with their airspace being used for Russian military attack, and being very scary and unpleasant, and yeah, frightening.
That's right. I hear also that there is some kind of resistance there, that they damaged the railway through which military supplies to the Russian troops via Belarus are coming, and some of them of these people, the saboteurs, as it were, have been caught and will probably stand trial soon.
Yes.
So yeah, there is a kind of guerrilla war-like resistance there on the territory of Belarus, even though Belarus itself doesn't take direct part in the war effort from Russia. Yeah, but to come back to this song, it's interesting not only because of its ethno-electronic version of the old folk song from the late 17th century, but also through adding a line that's also become a meme of some kind. this was pronounced by an actor and singer. This is a drag act called Verka Serduchka, who back in the mid 2010s said of being on stage, into the microphone, not as part of the song, but as part of a monologue, or his monologue, said, leave Ukraine alone, you ugly Muscovites, get с Украины, москаль некрасивый, in Ukrainian. And this line is used as a kind of hook in the song by Jerry Gale, otherwise known as Yana Shemaev. To continue with the folk topic, we get also Kalina as a symbol of Ukraine, which features often in folk tunes, folk songs there. The particular song called Oi Uluzi, Czerwona Kalina, or Red Viburnum, is a kind of plant with edible berries. This song became extremely popular all over the world for some reason. This is believed to be a traditional song, but it is not. It has an author, an actual theater director who was also gifted musically, Stepan Charnetsky, in the early 20th century, during the time of the First World War. He wrote his song for one of his theatrical performances, one of the plays that he staged. And it became popular among the fighters for Ukrainian independence back then, 100 years ago, and became their kind of unofficial anthem. And this song is very well known across Ukraine. The first short-lived version of independent Ukraine did happen in those days, in around 1918. That's when this song first caught on, but now everyone knows it in Ukraine anyway. One of the musicians who was going to join the army, Andrei Khlivnyuk from Boombox, kind of also another well-known band in Ukraine. He sang it in the streets of Kiev. It was early morning, no one was there. He just sang it, and one of his friends photographed this, and it was posted on Instagram at the time. And then suddenly became such a hit. It was turned into a massive rock song by Pink Floyd, of all others, called Hey Hey Rise Up, with over 10 million listeners on YouTube last time I checked. But also in many different versions elsewhere. What I'm suggesting we could play in your program, Jude, is a version in 4 languages by a German singer, female singer who does Ukrainian, English, French, and German version. So you could listen to that, just so that people understand how international this has been. Also demonstrating universal support in Europe and North America for Ukrainians here. Definitely, this is a good example of that coming through music, if not necessarily financial or military means. Also, interestingly enough, a Kazakh instrumental version played on Dombra by another woman, Aygul Ulkanbayeva. I think these two examples should work very well to introduce the extraordinary role this particular song is playing right now in the musical ornament of the Russo-Ukrainian military conflict.
And I think a lot of people who want to show support in a sort of solidarity way, but don't necessarily feel comfortable with expressions of war and conflict, will be much happier with instrumental folk music, or considered instrumental folk music as something they can get behind, expressing themselves, whereas the more personal war, immersed in war conflict songs might not be so comfortable for some people. Yeah, especially outside Ukraine. I think these older folk songs that people can feel much more comfortable singing them and joining in.
Absolutely, fully agree with you. But we haven't really mentioned the Russian position yet. Yeah, there's no consolidated Russian position, I'm happy to say. Certain bands have been more forthcoming in their support of the Kremlin. There had been large political rallies full of musicians that were well paid to perform there in support of the Kremlin side of the war. I'd like to mention two soundtracks coming from Russia in that respect. One of them is by a jazz rock band Leningrad, which is one of the biggest acts to emerge from Russia after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The frontman, Sergei Shnurov, has been for many years known for his open anti-Kremlin position, but now he's evolved from Kremlin critic to a Kremlin supporter, but not perhaps an open supporter, but kind of ambivalent supporter, and he presents this Russo-Ukrainian conflict as a kind of kitchen sink family drama with a strong hint of domestic violence. And every spouse on either side of the conflict tells their own story, and you wouldn't know how to believe. Who to believe. So it's really, well, first of all, a trivialization of what's going on. And second of all, refusing to take sides on this occasion, I suppose, is a position that many can sympathize with, especially in the information vacuum that Russia apparently experiences, because not all the facts about the war penetrate the invisible new Iron Curtain easily, but those that do penetrate, that sometimes they are twisted or denied or something like that.
Yeah, and it has that undermining element about it, making a standpoint like that, undermining both, undermining the voices. So it's saying, really, don't believe them in the future. Anything that happens in the future is also going to be under suspect, because that's what happens in domestic violence situations. The voices of the perpetrator, the voices of the people involved, undermined, and it's I can see it's a very strong image to use. It's a very strong stance, because it's taken away the agency from the voices as well.
Precisely. And I'm happy to say that maybe Leningrad expresses a view of quite a few of Russians, but that's not one point of view, and not the only point of view. Another song that I'd like to mention is an electronic track, No to War, by Vasily Shumov. He was very famous in Russia in the late 1980s. It's one of the first acts. He had a rock band called Center at that point. They were one of the first to get on television when rock music was banned from television, or almost banned from television in late Soviet Union. So afterwards, he went to the US and lived there for a long period of time, and then returned to Russia afterwards. Now he lives in Russia. Actually, it's not, I suppose, easy to stand and be counted when even if you go out into the open space somewhere in a central square in a Russian town, holding simply not just a piece of paper that says no to war, but simply a blank piece of paper, that's enough to be arrested and charged for being disorderly and discriminating against the Russian army. Vasily Shumov makes this soundtrack almost immediately after the war had begun, and it's a simple sentence that could be repeated many times over, and so certainly a laudable example of civic activism in music, in my view. And it was safer for Russians who live abroad these days to make their stance heard, anti-war stance, anti-Kremlin stance heard, and some of them went for it, such as frontman of the band Nogus Velo, which is translated as crumples in your leg. It's an ironic rock. His name is Max Pezhemsky and has been living in the United States for quite some time. So he's been using the genre of the football chant to make his point. And it's another example of minimalist lyrics in which he says, in addition to ole, 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 which we will all easily recognize, things like Russia go back. The normal thing in football, of course, is to send your team forward. But the refrain here is go back, Russia, go back, nazad, Россия, nazad. He sings it in Russian, and then the main sentences in the lyrics, they all have the same structure. Russian mothers are waiting for their sons, soldiers, to get back from the front line. Russian wives, the Russian sisters are waiting for the same. So that's what the song is about. So with a really minimal palette at his disposal, I think Pezhemsky actually achieves quite a lot here.
Wow, haven't heard that one yet. I'm really excited to hear it.
Yeah, simple but efficient, I would say. And the final one, which I would really like to finish with, is a song that is in fact a traditional rock ballad in beautiful Ukrainian by Sviatoslav Vakarchuk, who's himself from Western Ukraine. He's a member of Ukrainian elite. His father was principal at the Lviv University for some time, and then education minister. Vakarchuk himself holds a PhD in physics, and he founded a political party called Voice, which was in opposition. He himself twice was a member of the Ukrainian parliament, Rada. But his main activity actually is singing, and has been really popular across the Slavonic world, and in Russia not so long time ago, before Russia and Ukraine fell out. His career, he's got a long career with his band called Okean Elzy, Elza's Ocean. Elza, rumor has it that it was the name of one of his girlfriends, and he just wanted to emphasize the depths and the widths of her soul and intellect and so on. So he compared her to an ocean, and that became the name of the band, Elza's Ocean, Okean Elzy. And they produced very recently this song, which is a goodbye to Mariupol. Mariupol was in the news, as you know, as a stronghold of the Ukrainian resistance to Russia. Russia really wanted to capture this particular town for many reasons, partly because of its strategic importance. It's a large port on the Azov Sea, but also because, technically speaking, it belongs to the Donetsk region, and it's the Luhansk and Donetsk region which the Kremlin wants to capture in full, as far as possible, as fast as possible. So Mariupol went sort of fell victim to that, and the song is about hope that Mariupol will be restored as a Ukrainian city. The refrain goes, "Warship guns won't destroy my dream. My heart will never lose faith. The honorable city of Maria," Mariupol, that is, yeah, city of Maria. Empress, Russian empress called Maria is meant. The honorable city of Maria will keep standing for as long as the sun rises over the Sea of Azov. So that's the emotional point that I think many Ukrainians share now. God knows how the war will go, which way Russia is just too strong to reckon with. But of course, there is this biblical story about David and Goliath that perhaps should be noted in the relationship between Ukraine and Russia at the moment, and that's one possible outcome. It's difficult to predict how it all ends and when and where, but one thing is beyond doubt that the songs will keep coming, and many of them will be as good as anything else that has appeared before or will appear after.
Other impacts as well, I think, from the songs and from the war. That's not necessarily about winning the war. There can be changes in Russia, as there can be changes in the political thought of people and the way they behave that goes beyond kind of who's winning a war and who's occupying a territory as well. And maybe these songs will have a huger impact than than the outcome of the war itself is one thing, but there's much bigger outcomes as well in the length of time that we're living through and that will come afterwards.
Certainly. Many wartime songs, if we think back to World War II, for example, they're still with us, although they don't have any kind of primary meaning, any impetus that they emerged as a result of, but people still sing them and listen to them. So there is no doubt that some of the songs that have appeared since late February this year may well have a long life. Yeah,
I think this kind of time really brings people into writing stirring and really emotional, and that the songs get an extra emotional quality because of the suffering and the terrible situations that people are writing them in. I mean, to say, for instance, as you were saying earlier, that somebody's maybe writing, singing, performing a song in a cellar while there's bombs falling, then if you see, and this, we have an added aspect now to modern production in that we can see them actually performing on YouTube directly. So there's not even like suggested, this is actually them performing on YouTube in that circumstance. And I think that gives this added resonance to the song. It gives this added power that's on another level beyond the song itself in terms of lyrics and tune.
Quite right. Couldn't agree with you more. So that's all I had to say. We I don't know. Please feel free to cut and mix the way you think the strategy, the dramaturgy will work better for this particular program. Do you know by any chance when exactly it's going to be aired, please?
Well, I'm hoping to do the first. Let me just press finish recording because